you would reverse course if inflation were to be above your target level, even given that statement?
Well, if inflation goes above the target level, as we talked about in our statement in January, we take a balanced approach. We bring inflation back to the target over time, but we do it in a way that takes into account the deviations of both of our objectives, from their targets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this year, at 2 occasions, the Fed took policy actions which you defended as extremely important for the economy. But as you mentioned, there hasn't been any improvement in the labor market since the beginning of the year. Why should people believe this will make a difference? And the projections seem to suggest it's approximately a 0.4 reduction in unemployment. Is that the limit of what Fed policies can do going forward?
Well, our assessment, I talked about this at my remarks at Jackson Hole, our assessment and that of the research literature is that the policies that we've undertaken have had real benefits for the economy, that they have provided some support, that they have eased financial conditions and helped reduce unemployment. All that being said, monetary policy, as I've said many times, is not a panacea. It's not by itself able to solve these problems. We're looking for policymakers in other areas to do their part. We'll do our part, and we'll try to make sure that unemployment moves in the right direction. But we can't solve this problem by ourselves.
And do you think the 0.4% difference in the projections is about what's possible?
Well, what happens is going to depend on where the economy goes, how much ultimate accommodation we give the economy. The 0.4% you're referring to is the change in the forecast between the last projection and this one. But remember, people make projections assuming that policy is appropriate. So some of them may have assumed these policies in their last projections, and not all are assuming these policies in this projection. So that's probably a little bit of an understatement of what we think we can get. But in any case, again, I want to be clear that while I think we can make a meaningful and significant contribution to this problem, to reducing this problem, we can't solve it. We don't have tools that are strong enough to solve the unemployment problem.
You've made an eloquent explanation over the past couple of weeks of the Fed's ability to lower interest rates, but what's missing for many economists is how the transmission mechanism is going to work. Most people think this will have a minimal effect on rates. Can you give us an idea of how much you think it might push rates down, and why moving rates down a few basis points might change demand, which seems to be the problem in the economy?
Well, the ultimate effect is going to depend, of course, on how much we end up doing, and that in turn is going to depend on what the economy does. This is a conditional program. We're going to be providing accommodation according to how the economy evolves. I think that's the virtue of putting it this way, is that if the economy is weaker, we'll provide more support. If the economy strengthens on its own or other headwinds die down, then it'll require less support. So the amount of support we provide is going to depend on how the economy evolves. We do think that these policies can bring interest rates down, not just Treasury rates, but a whole range of rates, including mortgage rates and rates for corporate bonds and other types of important interest rates. It also affects stock prices. It affects other asset prices, home prices, for example. So looking at all the different channels of effect, we think it does have impact on the economy. It will have impact on the labor market. But the way I would describe it is a meaningful effect, a significant effect, but not a panacea, not a solution for the whole issue. We're just trying to get the economy moving in the right direction to make sure that we don't stagnate at high levels of unemployment, that we're making progress towards more acceptable levels of unemployment.
Robin, and then we'll come to Pedro.
Robin Harding from the Financial Times. Mr. Chairman, is this the limit of what the Fed could do? You refer in your statement to other policy tools. If the unemployment situation doesn't improve, then what other measures do you have available? Thank you.
Well, there's a variety of possibilities, and we continue to look at all different options. But the two primary types of tools, as I've discussed, are balance sheet actions, and of course we can restructure those, change those in various ways. The other type of tool is communication tools. And we continue to work on how best to communicate with the public and how best to assure the public that the Fed will remain accommodative long enough to ensure recovery. So working with our communications tools, clarifying our response to economic conditions might be one way in which we could further provide accommodation.
Pedro da Costa from Reuters. My question is, I want to go back to the transmission mechanism because speaking to people on the sidelines of Jackson Hole Conference, that seemed to be the concern about the remarks that you made, is that they could clearly see the effect on rates and they could see the effect on the stock market, but they couldn't see how that had helped the economy. So I think there's a fear that over time this has been a policy that's helping Wall Street but not doing that much for Main Street. So could you describe in some detail how does it really differ from trickle-down economics where you just pump money into the banks and hope that they lend?
Well, we are, this is a Main Street policy because what we're about here is trying to get jobs going. We're trying to create more employment. We're trying to meet our maximum employment mandate, so that's the objective. Our tools involve, the tools we have involve affecting financial asset prices, and those are the tools of monetary policy. There are a number of different channels, mortgage rates, I mentioned other interest rates, corporate bond rates, but also the prices of various assets, like, for example, the prices of homes. To the extent that home prices begin to rise, consumers will feel wealthier. They'll feel more disposed to spend. If house prices are rising, people may be more willing to buy homes because they think that they'll make a better return on that purchase. So house prices is one vehicle. Stock prices, many people own stocks directly or indirectly.
Mr. President, earlier our colleague, Senator Murray, complained that objections to the Veterans Jobs Bill was political. I think that was a thrust of part of her remarks, and that we should just go on and pass it and move on. My sole problem with the legislation, and Senator Murray, as a member of the Budget Committee, understands this, is it violates the budget. It's subject to a budget point of order. We would spend more money on this legislation than the Veteran Committee is authorized to spend. And if we do that, we are supposed to vote on it, and a budget point of order would lie, and those who want to waive the budget would move to waive the budget, and we would vote. It takes 60 votes to waive the duly agreed upon spending limit that we have in that regard, and that was part of the August agreement last year in which we raised the debt ceiling by $2.1 trillion. We agreed to put some limits on spending. Not much, but some. And here we are already after several different prior violations of the budget, back at it again. So that's the concern. Now, Senator Burr has offered legislation that would help solve the problem of unemployment among veterans, and his doesn't violate the budget. We could support it. I would note that the Veterans Committee never had a hearing on this. Nobody ever studied, called expert witnesses, had hearings in public, examined witnesses to find out if this plan is the best way to help veterans who are unemployed. We have 6 programs already. Maybe it would be better to consolidate some of them and add a little to it. Maybe some of them ought to be eliminated. And a new program that's outlined in the Murray amendment could be utilized to do that. But we've had no real opportunity to do that. And so what is the politics? I would say the politics is that the majority party, and Senator from Nevada, the majority leader, he doesn't want to talk about real issues of great importance. So this bill is brought up and utilized to fill up the whole week and so we're not going to take up several other pieces of legislation that are very, very important. So it's suggested that those Republicans who don't favor this way of dealing with unemployment of veterans, if you don't do that, you don't like veterans and you don't like people who served our country, and you're insensitive about that. Let me ask this question. If you care about veterans if you say this bill, which would cost $200 million, which is a lot of money, but not that much in terms of what we deal with. So if you don't support this bill, they say you don't care about veterans. So let me pose this question. If you care about our men and women in uniform who serve our country and veterans, what do you say about how could you oppose authorizing the defense bill? Senator Reid, the majority leader, has blocked the bringing up of the bipartisan approved defense authorization bill. It's been passed every year for over 50 years. That amounts to $631 billion. If we don't pass that, we're not taking care of the pay raise for military men and women and a lot of other initiatives in there. And I would just point out to my colleagues that it passed the Senate Armed Services Committee on a bipartisan basis, not just on a bipartisan basis, unanimously. But Senator Reid won't bring it up. The House has passed a defense authorization bill. They passed it in May. We've never brought it to the floor. He's refused to bring it to the floor. I suggest that those who say that if you have a question about the vet job bill for veterans, why don't we ask the questions, what do you think of the military if you won't bring up a military authorization bill? Do you care about them or not? What about the defense appropriations bill? The House has passed the defense appropriations bill. The Appropriations Committee of the Senate has passed a defense appropriations bill. It's on the floor waiting to be called up and voted on. It's not being voted on. And we're, again, talking about $600 billion. But this $200 billion bill is taking up the whole week, and the other bill won't even be brought up. And one more question. If you're concerned about veterans and jobs, what about the sequester? We're on track to hammer the Defense Department with half of the budget cuts. The Defense Department makes up about 1/6 of the federal government spending. It's going to take half of the cuts. It's already taken almost $500 billion in cuts. This would be another $492 billion in cuts to the Defense Department. Secretary Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, has told the President and the whole world this would be catastrophic. It would hollow out the military. It would endanger our ability to fulfill our mission. But we're on track to have that go into effect, those cuts that take place in January, and we're going to have military officials reduce dramatically, if that occurs, the number of men and women in uniform. We're going to have people coming out of the battlefield from Iraq and Afghanistan and other places wanting to make a career out of the military, thinking they can make a career out of the military. And all of a sudden, because of this sequester, they're going to walk in and get a pink slip. Sorry, we don't need you anymore. Good luck. Now, we have plans under the cuts that are in place on the Defense Department to draw down the number of personnel. This would be dramatically more. Where are they going to get jobs? And many of the people that would also lose their jobs in that process work for defense contractors or civilian employees of the Department of Defense who also are veterans, who got jobs as civilian employees in the Department of Defense. They'll be laid off. Why aren't we dealing with a sequester? Senator McCain earlier today said it was a shame that we're not dealing with these issues. Shame, 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 Senator McCain said. And I think that's right. And yet we have the spectacle of the majority party in this Congress attacking the Republicans for not liking the military because we don't agree to a budget-busting bill on how to create jobs that's never been through a committee for veterans, jobs for veterans. Never been through the committee and never had a proper process. Now, I don't agree with that. We have a serious problem in this Senate. We have a majority party in this Senate that's refusing to undertake the basic requirements of the United States Senate. We haven't passed a budget. We haven't passed a single appropriations bill. We certainly didn't pass the defense appropriations bill, the defense authorization bill that, as has been noted, has passed for 50-plus years, won't be even brought up to have debate on, and it passed the committee unanimously. What is this? This is a fear, it seems to me, a political fear. And the political fear is if you bring up these bills, Democrats might have to vote on amendments and things. And they don't want to vote. If you bring a budget to the floor, well, you have a right to offer amendments about the future financial course of America. And we get to have full debate about it and talk about it and offer amendments and be on record as to what we believe in, how much debt we think we can sustain in this country. And so they don't want to do that. Senator Reid said it's foolish to have a budget. It's not foolish to have a budget, of course. That's why we're in such a fix today, I would suggest. Can we do more for veterans? I think we can do more, and I think we can help them with their employment circumstances. I served 10 years in the Army Reserve. One of my duties was to be the representative for the employer support of Guard and Reserve, and that was to ensure that people who were called up for a National Guard or Army Reserve or go on active duty, make sure that when they come back there and they get the job that they had. They won't lose their position, their employment position as a result of serving their country. That's one of the things we did. When I was United States Attorney, I prosecuted some cases where I felt, and we won, the case where people had been lost their jobs as a result of being called up to military service. That's not acceptable. We need to protect our men and women. I have a history of that, but this job doesn't, in this bill doesn't guarantee that we're going to use the money wisely that's being spent. So I'm amazed that we're using our last hours here to move forward a bill that violates the budget when we don't have to. Senator Burr's bill doesn't violate the budget, and it will, I'm confident, do the job, do the same kind of job for helping veterans get jobs. So this is very odd to suggest that somehow those of us on this side are using politics to block a benefit to veterans. Give me a break. That's kind of an odd charge, isn't it? I'd say that people on our side are standing and asking principled questions. Yes, we'd like to do more for veterans. Yes, we hope to help them find jobs. But we agreed just last August to spending limits. We agreed just last August in exchange for raising the debt ceiling $2 trillion to reduce some spending. Not a lot, but some spending. And here we are just over a year later, and we're already busting those limits we agreed to. It's just not right, and it can't be the kind of thing we should be doing. And one more thing. It's obvious to those of us in the Senate, we take a minute to just think about it, and that is that sustaining the budget, point of order, not waiving the budget, does not kill the Murray bill or the Burr bill. It simply says, go back to committee, have a real hearing, bring the bill forward that actually stays within the budget. That's all it says do. And I tell you, if we continue this process, and we've done it several times already this year, of violating the budget, pretty soon the budget numbers that we have are going to be worthless. So that would be my concern. Let's send the legislation back to committee. Let's have a hearing. Let's let a bill come forward. Let's consider the 6 jobs programs for veterans that are already in place, see if they need to be improved, expanded, consolidated, how this bill should be passed to complement those programs, and see if we can't get the maximum benefit for veterans for every dollar the taxpayers have sent to us. And to the extent to which we spend a dime above the budget, it's either borrowed or paid for by new taxes. That's just no doubt about it. There are new taxes in this bill, new revenue that's in this bill. Some of it is really gimmicky, I got to tell you. And it's not the kind of way we should do business, in my view. So, Mr. President, I appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts. I believe that the budget point of order should not be waived. We shouldn't waive the budget and spend more than the budget. We should send this bill back to committee, tell them to get busy on a thorough review of the job situation of veterans and come forward and help us and produce a bill that we can pass that does the job and doesn't violate the budget. We spend $3,700 billion. We ought to be able to find $200 million somewhere in that budget to meet this challenge if we need to. I thank the chair and would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
As we wait for a senator to speak, a headline in National Journal, Fed to politicians were not swayed. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke does not care about Capitol Hill or campaign trail bullies, according to the National Journal. He has said repeatedly, as the central bank has come under a political magnifying glass this year, that the Fed bases its decisions on economics, not politics. And on Thursday, the Fed chairman backed up that assertion with action. The central bank acted boldly, about as boldly as it could have, kicking off an open-ended round of bond buying, extending its commitment to keep short-term interest rates low and pledging to do even more if the labor market does not improve substantially. We're going to pick up Ben Bernanke's press conference from today during Q&A from reporters.
And it might throw the economy back into recession. So I think one very basic thing that could be done to help address the recovery, the weakness of the recovery and the need for more employment would be to address the fiscal cliff while simultaneously addressing longer-term fiscal sustainability issues, which remain, of course, very serious. So that's one area where there's a lot of potential benefit. If the fiscal cliff isn't addressed, as I've said, I don't think our tools are strong enough to offset the effects of a major fiscal shock. So we'd have to think about what to do in that contingency. So I think it's really important for the fiscal policymakers to work together and try to find a solution for that.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Patrick Walter with the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. I have 2 questions, if I may. One is, in the projections, in the economic and inflation projections, you foresee a low inflation rate below 2% till 2015, not you personally, but the FOMC. I'm wondering, if you look at the growth rates, you have growth rates of about 3.4 percentage points in 2014 and 2015. How long do you think that it might work that you have such strong growth and no inflation pressure? And the second question, if I may, is a lot of economists don't see too much effect out of a further round of QE3. Aren't you worried that in promising that you will do whatever you can, even if it's tiny small, that you give some kind of carte blanche to the fiscal policy and to Congress not to do enough on their side of the policy action?
Well, on inflation, we do anticipate at some point what's normal in a recovery, which is, given that the economy fell very quickly and there's a lot of unused capacity, there's a lot of slack in the economy, it would be normal that there would be a period where the economy would grow faster than trend in order to make up some of the slack that was created. We don't anticipate the economy is going to be overheating anytime soon. And as long as we pay close attention to inflation expectations, as well as the trajectory of the economy, we think inflation will remain close to our 2% target. On your second question, certainly there is a range of views on how effective these tools are. I spent a lot of time, as all of my colleagues have, looking at the evidence. And of course, the staff here have done a great deal of work on the question. And the bottom line for most of it, most of the research is that while these tools are not so powerful that they can solve the problem, they are at least able to provide meaningful support to the economy. Our job is to use the tools we have to meet our mandate, which is maximum employment and price stability. So if we have tools that we think can provide some assistance and we're not meeting our mandate, then I think that our obligation is to do what we can. Of course, we would like to see policies across the board to help address these issues, but that's not our province. We are the monetary policy authorities, and our job is to use monetary policy as effectively as we can.
Okay, we'll go to Steve, then we'll go to John, Lee, and then we'll come back to Scott.
Steve Beckner of MNI, Mr. Chairman. There have been questions raised by people like Columbia professor Michael Woodford and others about the credibility of your forward guidance on the future path of the federal funds rate. The idea being that to the extent it's conditional, it's not really convincing and doesn't provide the kind of confidence that you referred to. Now, in this latest statement, you've removed some of that conditionality. And I'm particularly struck by the statement that the committee expects that a highly accommodative stance of monetary policy will remain appropriate for a considerable time after the economic recovery strengthens. I assume that was done to make your forward guidance more credible, and yet the question remains whether, as the economy picks up steam, whether the FOMC will really follow through and keep rates low, or whether you will do as the Fed has always done and begin to raise the funds rate.
Well, that's an important question. Michael Woodford, who, by the way, is my former colleague and co-author and friend, so I know him quite well, know his work quite well. I think actually the thrust of his research is that forward guidance, communication about future policy is in fact the most powerful tool that central banks have when the interest rate is close to zero. And he advocates policies like nominal GDP targeting, for example, that would essentially require credibility lasting many years. The implication being that the Fed would target the nominal level of GDP and promise to do that for many years in the future, even if inflation, rose as part of that policy. So his own perspective is that credibility is the key tool that central banks have in order to get traction at the zero lower bound. Whether we have the credibility to persuade markets that we'll follow through is an empirical question. And the evidence, which I also again discussed in my remarks recently, is that when we've announced extended guidance, that financial markets have responded to that private sector forecasters have changed their estimates of what unemployment and inflation will be when the Fed begins to remove accommodation. So the empirical evidence is that our announcements do have considerable credibility. And I think there's a good reason for that, which is that we have talked a lot, both publicly and privately, about the rationale for maintaining rates low, even as the economy strengthens. And I think the basic ideas are broadly espoused within the committee. And so there is a consensus.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent that on Wednesday, September 19th, following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of S. 3457, and notwithstanding Rule 22, it be in order for Senator McConnell or his designee to raise a budget point of order against the substitute amendment number 2789. That if a budget point of order is raised, the majority leader or his designee be recognized for a motion to waive the applicable budget points of order, that the time until 12 noon that day be equally divided between the two leaders or the designees on the motion to waive, that upon the use or yielding back of that time, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to waive, that if the motion to waive the applicable budget points of order is not agreed to, cloture motions with respect to the substitute and the underlying bill be withdrawn, and the bill be returned to calendar, and the majority leader then be recognized. That if the motion to waive is agreed to at a time to be determined by the majority leader after consultation with the Republican leader, and notwithstanding Rule 22, the motion to commit be withdrawn, and that all pending amendments be withdrawn with the exception of the pending substitute amendment number 2789, that there be 30 minutes or date equally divided between the two leaders or the designees, that upon the use or leading back of that time, the Senate proceed to the vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the substitute amendment number 2789. If cloture is invoked, the remaining post-cloture time be yielded back, and the Senate then proceed to vote in relation to the substitute amendment number 2789. That following that vote, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to invoke cloture on S 3457 as amended, if amended. And if the cloture is invoked, the post-cloture time be yielded back, the bill be read a third time. Senate proceed to vote on passage of the bill as amended, if amended. And following the vote on passage, the majority leader be recognized. Cloture is not invoked on substitute amendment 2789. The cloture motion on the underlying bill be withdrawn, and the bill be returned to the calendar. Further, that no amendments, motions, or points of order be in order to the substitute amendment or the bill other than those listed in this agreement. Finally, when the Senate receives H.J. Res. 117, the continuing resolution, it be placed on the calendar that on Wednesday, September 19th, it be in order for me, Senator Reid of Nevada, to move to proceed H.J. Res. 117 and file cloture on the motion to proceed. Finally, that if a cloture motion is filed notwithstanding Rule 22, the vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed H.J. Res. 117 occur at 2:15 p.m. on Wednesday, September 19th.
If there is no objection, and there is no objection, it is so ordered.
Note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call roll.
Mr. Akaka.
It seems like the plan has changed here in the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid coming to the floor a short time ago saying that there will not be roll call votes here in the chamber tonight or over the weekend. We're hearing that there will be a point of order vote on the Veterans Jobs Bill next week on Wednesday. And after that vote, the Senate will debate the temporary spending bill to keep the government operating through March of next year. The House passed that continuing resolution this afternoon. All day today, we've been talking about a planned vote tonight on another version of the Veterans Jobs Bill, the Murray Substitute, happening after 1 a.m. Eastern Time tonight in the chamber. But Senate Majority Leader Reid said on the floor a short time ago that there will be a point of order vote on the Veterans Jobs Bill next week, on Wednesday. And that after that vote, the Senate will debate the temporary spending bill to keep the government operating through March of next year. The House passed that continuing resolution this afternoon. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid confirmed on the Senate floor